China studies, Pakistan studies should be a part of university curriculum, and they are not. I myself teach in a university. I have seen curriculum from other universities. The vice chancellor sitting across major universities, central universities in India, should see why are these things not there in the curriculum. Why is basic geopolitical awareness not in the curriculum? Why are not we studying China in the way that China is studying us? Why are not we studying Pakistan? Why are not we reading books which are coming from Pakistan as a part of curriculum? Why are we not talking about information warfare? We have some, I mean, pardon me for saying this, but we have some, there's a term in Hindi which is called kuch bhi.
Namaste. There is a war going on right now, not with tanks and missiles, but with ideas, information, and ideology. Most of us don't even know that such a war exists among us. But today we are going to talk about that invisible war. And with us today is Dr. Sonali Chitalkar, Professor of Political Science at the Miranda House, Delhi University. Her expertise is in public policy and international politics. Welcome to Sangam Talks, ma'am. A quote comes into my mind by Sun Tzu. In his book Art of War, he says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And then he goes on to say, if you know yourself but not the enemy, or every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. And then finally he concludes, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Sonali ji, know the enemy and know yourself. In this age of information warfare, who is the enemy and where do we stand?
Okay, so Sabrishji, you've started with a quote by Sun Tzu. And let me take you back to the time period when Sun Tzu is writing this. He's writing in 5th, 6th century BC. As usual, dates are a little ambiguous, but we know that he's writing 5 to 6 centuries before the advent of the Christian era. This in itself should tell you, and Sun Tzu wrote in China. So this in itself should tell you, Sabrishi, what is the importance of knowing the enemy. Okay, you've spoken about information warfare. I'll keep that as a side right now. I'll keep it a bit aside. Let me bring home the importance of knowing the enemy in the context of this very tragic event that happened in Pahalgam. Okay, so just as a common citizen, a normal citizen, if you ask the citizen of India who is the enemy, you will get a variety of answers. You will say, no, 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 arre, Pakistan is to, arre, chota sa enemy. You know, India to baap hai, baap. And then you will also get an answer that, okay, the good, Air Marshal has said it. And, I'm nobody to question the wisdom of the defense forces or the government, but they have said the Pakistani army and the Pakistani terrorists are the enemy. Somebody will say that China is an enemy. George Fernandez, honorable minister, said it so many years ago. Somebody will say, no, 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 China is not the enemy because see, we are consuming so many goods from China, and then you want to raise this bogey against China. So stop consuming Chinese goods. In all this noise, is the common citizen of India able to understand who is the enemy? Why are we not able to say that Pakistan is the enemy? Like, like I said just a couple of seconds ago, that Our military, our forces, they have defined the Pakistani army and the Pakistani terrorists as the enemy. But I'm sitting here as an academician. I'm sitting here as a citizen of a democracy with full access to information. And as we go on to discuss this issue a little more, I will show you why, as somebody who reads, as somebody who has access to information, I know that Pakistan is the enemy. China is the enemy. The nation, it's the citizens, the common citizens like you and me, have to decide that Pakistan or China are the enemies.
So, with two hostile neighbors and one neighbor in the making of hostility, wherein one of the neighbor is religiously motivated in promoting terrorism, the other, that is China, had a history of communism, but gradually they transformed themselves into neo-capitalists, but still they have their roots supporting Pakistan, with all three of them having a hatred towards India, religiously, economically, globally. So, at this instance, where does India stand in the Indian subcontinent and also in geopolitics in challenging and seeing this terrorism?
Yeah, so we have to understand that probably India has the worst neighbors that any country could ever ask for. And from there on, we have to try and understand how India is coping with it and how geopolitically India has to, ensure that its national interests are they are met. So when you talk about Pakistan, the very formation of Pakistan had two very important elements in it. One was the ideological element, the two nation theory, very clearly. I don't think I need to repeat it at this forum. We all know. The compulsion was the two nation theory. And we must not forget that even at that time, it was geopolitics. So, I mean, we have all seen how Pakistan at that point of time was a part of the great game of the superpowers at that point of time in history. So, both these conditions, it's important for India to understand that both these conditions have been persistent since the time of independence. They have been persistent, and we have to thereupon, and what has changed right now is the fact that Pakistan has also become, see, China has its own geopolitical code. So it's a very important to understand how Pakistan has become, the word vassal state is used for Pakistan. It's a vassal state of China. So far as the geopolitical scenario is concerned, it is probably the worst neighborhood that we could have asked for. However, I will still say that the way that we have coped with our interests and this current escalation which happened, it shows that India is now coming forth with its own independent strategic positioning as far as geopolitics is concerned, and will certainly use its newfound insights, newfound strategies to actually position a geopolitical code for itself, which is going to be in national interest. So I suppose we are doing very well. This present dispensation, the present government is doing very well in a hostile neighborhood, like I would say even past governments handled a very hostile neighborhood, a geopolitical scenario which was very, very hostile to us.
The government has done really well over the past decade when it comes to Kashmir. But over the last 1 month, what is brewing in Kashmir is about Pahalgam. And it seems to be a political project, it seems to be a religious project that was carried on. And the message was very clear. When the terrorists who gunned down, they really wanted to know whom they're gunning down. They asked for the religion, they asked for the, in case they had a doubt, they asked to recite the rituals or Islamic prayers, and they confirmed that whoever they're killing is a Hindu. So, what message does this say in this information age? What was their motive in doing so? Was there a greater plan beyond that to ensure that riots happen across India by having that? So, how do you connect the information that is being collected from that sense, and how do we connect it with the overall perspective of the geopolitics?
See, Kashmir, I may have many points at which I have questions on what the government is doing. But hands down, the policy in Kashmir has been positive, and it has been positive not just in national interest, but also in the interest of the common Kashmiri citizen, the person living, the common Kashmiri. So now why am I saying that? It's not just a rhetoric. I'm not just speaking rhetorically. What I'm saying is that if you look at Kashmir, there are two things which a person normally understands about Kashmir. The first thing is that, well, it's a state in which there is a terrorism. Okay, and the second thing is that Kashmir is very much, for the past 70 years, invested in what was its special status. So this only complicates the problem. All Kashmiris are terrorists? No, certainly not. But all Kashmiris will believe they are special. So this is something that the government understood very well. And as far as Kashmir is concerned, there are a number of myths which have become reality. Like one of the myths about Kashmir is that it's only after the 1987 elections were rigged that Kashmir, launched into terrorism. So and this is a myth. I say it is a myth because I will take you to a larger regional context, and that's the time when I would also like to point out this book. I'll pick it up in a minute or two, but let's first see what happened before 1987 in Kashmir. The point which you should study if you want to look at Kashmir, maximum number of researches should happen between the time period of 1979 to 1987. And you will see 1979, a major event which happened in the region was, larger region was the Mecca Masjid, the assault on Mecca Masjid which happened. So now from 1979 onwards, and this book is by, it's called The Call for Transnational Jihad. I don't know why it is put in a smaller font here, but this should be a much larger font. When you look at this book, it seems that it is a book on the Lashkar-e-Taiba in the time period 1985 to 2014. And it's written by Arif Jamal, who is a Pakistani. Basically, he has been a journalist and he has studied the, the concept, the idea of transnational jihad in the region for 18 years. So this is 18 years of research which he has distilled into this book. So he tells us how 1979 was a key event from which you had this idea of jihad spreading to, all across the Islamic region, of which Kashmir forms a part. So what I'm trying to say, Sabrish ji, is that the people of Kashmir, the people living in Kashmir, they are not, they would be affected. They would be affected, A, by the fact that they are a part of this Islamic crescent. But again, I'm not saying that all Kashmiris are terrorists. And then you also had this whole idea of there being a special status in Kashmir. So that is something which will take maybe another 70 to 140 years to change. The policy has changed in 2019, but it will take another 70 years to change. The second part of your question was that what happened in Pahalgam. There were people who were identified on the basis of their religion, and they were, profiled, and they were killed. They were asked to recite the Kalma. And what about this information? And was it to cause riots? So let me tell you, this is not new. This kind of profiling is not new. It is something that has happened in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, has happened in the state of Punjab. And yeah, it has happened in Bengal. So wherever you have terrorism which is driven by religion, this thing has happened. Yeah, segregation of victims. What has changed now is the fact that we live in the digital age. And if you remember, this thing has gone, it has gone out of public memory. But those who undertook this terrorist attack, they were wearing body cams. And this is something very similar to what happens in other parts of the world where, this is very similar to what the ISIS did. So now you have this information. You have the information which can be weaponized. So your question of whether was it something that was intended to, drive India into riots, communal riots, I will say we are a very sensible country. A lot of, after the event, there were two very important things that were going around, statements by, common citizens. Some, one was the statement by the family of one of the victims that, oh no, we don't want Kashmiris or Muslims to be targeted. Well, I would say that it has not happened. It's not likely to happen. We are not a country which is going to be driven. Please tell me the data. Did you find any Muslim or any Kashmiri being largely targeted? There were, some little incidents here and there which were reported in the media, and those are very controlled. The local administration took steps to control that. So this, and then there were a number of, social media posts by some by veterans, some by other members of society saying that, oh, no, no, this is, we should not we should not launch into riots. And it's, I mean, I would very respectfully put that within the brackets of moral grandstanding. Even if that was an aim, that could have been an aim, but we as a society, India as a society, needs more than this provocation to actually launch into full-fledged Hindu-Muslim rights. Not that it has not happened, but certainly it was not. The intentions were there. Yeah, the intentions were there, and certainly we, as I would say that it's Bharatiya society which has had a very mature response to this event.
So, had the society been not mature, what would have been the repercussions based on this particular psychological warfare in sending the message loud and clear कि धर्म क्या है?
Yeah, actually, see, again, I will say that for that you really need to understand the nature of terrorism, which is, there, which entire all over the world, we are struggling with terrorism, which draws its inspiration from religion. So, when you understand the roots of that struggle, when you understand the roots of that terrorism, then you understand that it is certainly dharm kya hai fits in very well into that format, and for that reason, I would say, please undertake a thorough reading. This should be a basic reading. This book should be a basic reading across universities because it tells you how, whether it is the Jamaates, whether it's the Hizbul Mujahideen or whether it's the Lashkar-e-Taiba or whether it is the, other terrorist organization, the TRF, which is supposed to be a local, offshoot of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. So they all form a common pool in Pakistan under the Jamaatul Dawa. And this message should go out clearly. This book says it. This book says how the people who started the Jamaatul Dawa are linked to the people who undertook the Mecca Masjid incident in 1979, how followers of Juhemas Ikwahan, they are called, spread all over the world, and how they started these organizations. So you have to look at how the Jamaat-e-Dawa is an umbrella organization And the Lashkar-e, at one point of time, America has admitted, USA has admitted that Lashkar-e-Taiba is a proscribed terrorist organization. However, what took you spoke about narratives, you spoke about psychological warfare. What took precedence in the minds of people was the Al Qaeda. What is not known is that the Al Qaeda and the Jamaatul Dawa are close cousins. I mean, I would go as far as to say that they are twin brothers. And we need to look at how it is the Jamaatul Dawa, which is the organization responsible for. We are listening to Murid Ke now when our good generals and our good air marshals speak about Murid Ke and Bhavalpur. This book has said it 10 years ago that these are the organizations which have deep roots in Pakistani society. I will say they have deep roots in Pakistani society. I'm giving you a message here. And they are very well entrenched in the Pakistani society. It took an Asim Munir, who was a part of the Pakistan, who is, well, you can say Pakistan, face of the Pakistani army. It took him to for us to realize that this extent of radicalization is there in Pakistan. So why would we not look at the Jamaatul Dawa? Why would we not make that link between the 1979 Mecca Masjid event, the Juhe Mans Ikwahan, and how people who were a part of this Makkah Masjid incident, how they spread all over the world, and how in Pakistan this ideology is entrenching itself. It is then that you will realize that Dharm Pooch Ke Mara is a part of a much larger call for transnational jihad. And this is a Pakistani who is writing this book. So I think we really need to see how we want to study. You said we started by saying that we need to know the enemy. The question that we should be asking is, are we even trying to know the enemy? I'm sure, books like these are very much a part of our military institutes and the forces are reading them. But are you and I, as common citizens, doing this? So that is the question that we should be asking.
So today in the digital age, we stand at a place wherein every Indian is a soldier, not from the perspective of army or defense, but as a social soldier, wherein the information that is being pumped into the platforms, pumped into the media, needs constant revision, needs constant filtering. So when we talk about psychological warfare or psychological perception, misperception, or psychological maneuvering, so, how or where do we stand as a citizenry, or where do we stand as a society in filtering these things?
At this point of time, we do not stand very well. Our government is doing, our military is doing its part very well. But as a common citizen, we first need to understand that yes, there, there is a mind space which is a battlefield. So that is the first point, understanding. If you, I'll just ask you to recall the various 2 or 3 press conferences which were given by the DGMOs, and very clearly they spoke about the 3 domains. They spoke about the air domain, they spoke about the land domain, and they spoke about the water domain. All the while they were engaging in the psychological domain. All the while they were assuring this very big nation that, and that we are good. What we did was a good action, and they used the mind space in order to establish that. So yes, psychological warfare is very much here to stay. What we need to do as citizens is we need to be very careful. We need to access information. We need to be very careful. We need to filter what we are forwarding, what we are consuming, what we are, spreading. That is something that we as citizens can do. And in order to do that, it's, I mean, it's very easy to say, okay, well, be very careful about what you're forwarding. But how will you do that? In order to do that, you need to understand, and I'm going to use a word, I'm going to say we need to understand the fault lines of our nation. The fault is a negative word, but I will still want to use that word and say that every citizen of the country needs to understand what are the fault lines of this nation, and there are many. So that would be a major podcast on its own. But I would say one fault line, just to give you an example, would be religious fault lines. The Hindu Muslim fault line, the Hindu Sikh fault line. These are fault lines, and there are many more. But we need to be informed about the fault lines. We need to know that this device in our hands cannot be used to make us weaker along these fault lines. A very positive role was played by citizens in this recent 2 weeks of turmoil that we have seen.
So you spoke about the psychological offensive that was given at the press releases or press conferences by the DGMOs, right? And even at the national level or at the army headquarter level, they had to deal with fake news. Even the defense minister of Pakistan himself was a victim of fake news when he claimed at the CNN, IBN, or CNN that he found in the social media report that Pakistan had downed a Rafale. Later on, through satellite imageries, even US also had asserted that no, even that India did not even face a scratch.
Yeah.
And again, the army chief or the other defense officials, they had to clarify, they had to say repeatedly that no, we were the ones who did the offensive, and you are not even in a position to be defensive. So when fake news or fake narratives happen at that level, where are the citizens placed?
See, as far as information is concerned, there is a concept when you're talking about the psychological, war, and when you're talking about the mind space. Information per se is harmless, but information that is weaponized is harmful. So you have to, a citizen has to be trained to understand, and that can happen only when you have, uh, you have areas like information warfare as a part of your mainstream curriculum, and especially, very importantly, undergraduate curriculum. So, which is something which we are severely lacking in.
So like something wherein military understanding or military perspective is fused into civilian perspective.
Yeah. So you spoke about civil military fusion, military civil fusion. Incidentally, let me tell you, there are two countries which are doing this very well. And I wouldn't say that India is not doing it. I'll tell you how. I'll back this up with proper arguments. The two countries which are doing very well are Israel and China. So for them, military civil fusion is a part of what is called the comprehensive national power. So what has happened basically is, because of the changing nature of warfare, now we are in fifth generation warfare, where I won't say kinetic, I will say kinetic action is still the most important, and somebody from the military would be very much required to talk to the nation about this. But as far as me as a citizen and as an academician is concerned, I will say that civil military fusion is the way that both Israel and China have gone. Now, how have they done that? They have done that at various levels. They have done that in the area of technology. So has India. There's this whole call for Atmanirbhar Bharat and defense production, and looking at how we've always had the DRDO, but looking at how the outreach to scientists has been undertaken. So that whole project is a project of civil military fusion, which both Israel and China undertake. What China also does is, and even Israel does that in a very large way, that the military does not operate in a silo. There is a citizen connect, and in Israel that is through their reservist program, and in China it is through the universities which are reaching out to militaries. They are, and this whole civil military fusion is happening at the university level, which is why I say that universities in India have a huge role to play. We also have, most universities and schools in this country have a very thriving National Cadet Corps program, which is again something that our government is asking us to focus on, asking citizens to focus on. The whole, I know it is going to be a controversial statement, because then again you will have to have a separate podcast on this, but the whole Agniveer program in a way was a program of civil military fusion. Very well said. And how it, I mean, how it shaped, we are a democracy, and in a democracy there is always a policy contestation is happening. I will again, that is why I will say that that is one fault line which has emerged in our country. The outreach, the debate, the discussion over military issues, be it the Agniveer policy, be it the pensions issues. So that is again a fault line. We should realize that. Citizens of the country should realize that. And therefore, I think if we want to look at comprehensive national power, if we want to look at civil military fusion, we have to look at, we have to follow good practices from India and learn from our number one enemy, China.
So you spoke about Agniveer as one example of military civil fusion, wherein the expectants are expected to serve in the army for 4 years, get trained, and later on get absorbed into paramilitary, banks, etc., etc. And then yet a section of the Agniveers are expected to have pursue their own business. So I think this is one good way of having military and civil fusion. And from the perspective of psychological warfare, again coming to that, can we say that these ex-Agniveers are in society to create awareness among the society, at least some fraction of them? And how do you think they will be in a position to mitigate psychological warfare?
Oh yes, I will. I will not only just talk about Agniveer, because that's a policy which is, I mean, it's in so much of debate and discussion. You will certainly need somebody from the military to talk to you about that. But I will certainly say that programs like National Cadet Corps, programs like the Agniveer, I mean, you look at the National Cadet, the students who enroll in National Cadet Corps, you see a stark difference among students who enroll and students who don't. Because the curriculum is structured in a way that these students, the ones who are enrolling for these kind of programs, they are, they are turned to think in national interest. So, I mean, not to say that others don't, but universities are supposed to, if you look at the first university commission in 1949, the universities are supposed to orient students who enroll towards national interest. Okay, so I mean, and that was the first university commission was under the Congress government. So I think that sustained effort has to be made by universities to ensure through a various range of programs that yes, these values are instilled. And of course, I mean, whatever policies that the government takes out, like Agniveer, etc., they must be, looked at in a from the perspective of civil military fusion.
Sonali ji, you spoke about Jamaatul Dawa. What exactly is Dawa? Whether it's politically projected, it's a psychological project. If you could throw more light upon it.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, because uh, it will also take us into a conversation about. I spoke about how you have asked me questions about psychological warfare, and I have also said that there are fault lines. We need to look at the fault lines. So it's not like, India has the largest Muslim population in the world. We have, a very, very huge, thriving Muslim population who are a part of our, country. And so we did not in 1947 look at the, we do not accept the two nation theory on its face. So when we talk about, dawa, this question came into my mind, Sabrish, that, I mean, what exactly are we looking at when we are looking at Hindu-Muslim relations? So I did. I went to the. I don't read Arabic. I don't read Urdu, but I certainly went into the closest text that we could get, and I looked at the works of Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, and so he, considered one of the most peaceful, variant of. We have these arguments on variants of Islam. So when I looked at his work, a lot of it is focused on dawa. And what I, want to really talk about is from his, you can go to the website is, www.cps.org, and uh, these books are authored by him and very widely available. So when you talk about dawa, dawa is supposed to be one of the core commandments of the Quran. Okay. And it is a duty which is incumbent. Whatever I'm saying is from the works of Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. Okay. And it is one of the core commandments of Islam, and it is something that every Muslim has to do. It's binding. Yeah, it is binding. So you can do a lot of other things, but if you are not engaging in dawa, then you are not being a true Muslim. Now, when you are engaging in dawa basically means calling a person to Islam. So, obviously, you are calling a non believer to Islam. So, dawa has to be undertaken amongst non believers. Okay. So, you are the da'i, and the non believer is called the madhu. Okay. So, you are supposed to be calling the madhu to Islam. Okay. And so far so good. It's, propagation of religion is something which is allowed to us by the Constitution of India. So far so good. But then further goes on to say that dawa is bringing a non-believer to his original state. So what is the original state? The original state is the glorious state of Islam. Okay. Yeah, so you have to come back to the, so they have, and so so how are you calling the non-believer? You will call him through conversion to Islam. And when you are converting somebody to Islam, then it is the path to paradise. Okay. So conversion is a natural thing. It is not something that it may bother you or me, but it does not bother the Dai, because he is bringing the non-believer to the original state, and conversion is a natural outflow of this situation. Then how do you undertake dawa? Very important, because then that brings us to organizations like Jamaatul Dawa. It also brings us to organizations like the Tablighi Jamaat. Okay. So there are two ways that you can undergo dawa. You contact a non-believer individually. Secondly, you contact non-believers in groups. Okay. Now this is where to me a problem arises. So further, dawa is explained. It is said that when you go into groups of non-believers, there may be certain habits that you find disgusting. For example, habits like idol worship. Now, habits like idol worship are called rujus or unclean. Okay. So, so a dai must go into the non-believers knowing that there will be unclean habits, but he must not be affected by them. And this is where, sir, you are dividing the world into believers and non-believers, which I see as a major problem. I am not I am a believer. I may not believe in what you are saying, but I am a believer. So this is where dawa becomes problematic. This clear distinction between a non-believer and a believer, the religiocentric assumption that Islam is superior and that the original state is Islam and conversion is natural. It is as natural as can be. And it is taking a non believer with his habits which reek of rujus towards the paradise that is Islam. And these are the kind of ideas. This is a, I mean, these are pretty peaceful ideas. I will still say these are peaceful ideas. But what is undertaken in the organizations like Jamaatul Dawa, you can imagine. Hafiz Saeed is considered an alim. The Pakistani media glorifies him. He is platformed across all media channels in Pakistan. He is also sitting with the Pakistani army, with the ISI. You have seen what happened with Masood Azhar. So these are the ideas that are, I think, extreme. These are the ideas which you can't bury your head in the sand. You have to, this country has to have a conversation over dawa, over conversion, over various other issues that, you know, stream out from this kind of a thought which is dividing you into believers and non-believers and which is assuming religiocentric superiority over a large section of the population. So we can no longer close our eyes to that. These have to be debated.
So, in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, it's these clerics like Hafiz Saeed who dictate the politics of the day and the military establishment, including the ISI. So, in India, where do we find such a ecosystem happening? Whether it's the mosque, whether it's the Islamic oriented institutions, or whether it is the communists trying to facilitate such happenings. Because even in India, also such a things happen. Riots happen that are mostly pointed towards the happenings or discussions within the mosque and all. So where do we find the roots coming from Pakistan, and how does things line up in India, which further, as we come, creates a new psychological warfare as such. I'm trying to cover up the entire scene.
So we must understand, and this is where I will come back to what universities and curriculum should do. We must understand that the roots of Pakistan lie in India. We cannot close our eyes to that link between Deoband and the entire movement for Pakistan. It's a part of history, and we have to look at it. And as to what can we do about it? See, after such a major incident like Pahalgam, and I will say, we are still in a state of high alert. We are in a state of ceasefire. But this is a moment of churning when all of us, you asked me a question, what can citizens do? I will answer that question now in a more nuanced way, Sabrishi. There is psychological warfare, there is information warfare, and a lot of things can be spoken about that. But what can the common citizens of India do? I am a teacher. I should understand that I will use my position as a teacher to spread ideas, to spread information about national security. I want to discuss, when we talk about curriculum, then the three wars that we have had with Pakistan, the Kargil war, the wars with China, the war and information warfare, China studies, Pakistan studies should be a part of university curriculum, and they are not. I myself teach in a university. I have seen curriculum from other universities. So, what can we as citizens do? We can ask. Just today and yesterday, JNU, the Vice Chancellor of JNU and the Vice Chancellor of Jamia, they have, discarded all MOUs and agreements with Turkey and Azerbaijan. I will also say that these are the leaders, the vice chancellors sitting across major universities, central universities in India, should see why are these things not there in the curriculum. Why is basic geopolitical awareness not in the curriculum? Why are not we studying China in the way that China is studying us? Why are not we studying Pakistan? Why are not we reading books which are coming from Pakistan as a part of curriculum? Why are we not talking about information warfare? We have some, I mean, pardon me for saying this, but we have some, there's a term in Hindi which is called kuch bhi. We are doing kuch bhi as far as these import. Are we aware that we are we aware about the Nathula skirmish with China? It's not a part of the curriculum. That's why we are not aware of it. So, what we need to do is we need, as teachers, as vice chancellors, as media persons, we don't need to sit with the enemy. We need to actually do our own work. As a teacher, I want to teach this in the curriculum. As a vice chancellor, I want to ensure that these things are in the curriculum. As a media person, I want to ensure that I am talking about these things in my media programs. So that is how, as far as psychological warfare, information warfare is concerned, it is a 24/7 event which cannot be done by the military alone. That is why we are talking about civil military fusion. And this is the point at which I would also like to say, why is this book not in our curriculum? This is the book called The Lightning Campaign. I'm sorry to get a spiral because this is out of print. But this book talks about how India created a country in 12 days. Do we know about this? Do our students know about this? The fact that in 1971, we mapped geopolitics by creating a country in 12 days. That's why it's called the Lightning Campaign. And it is written by Major General DK Palit, and it is something which should have been a part of the curriculum in our universities, at least in undergraduate syllabus. Otherwise, most of what we are reading in our syllabus, be it syllabus in global politics or international relations or other core areas, security or other, unless you are studying about your wars, unless you're studying about what our military has done, unless you're studying about what China is doing, unless you're studying what Pakistan is doing, we are doing a kuch bhi syllabus. I will say it, I mean, I'll take this platform to call for this kind of curriculum change. Therefore, citizens like you and me can be a part of this 24/7 warfare, which is called the fifth generation warfare. And the air domain is taken care of by our good air marshal. The naval domain is taken care of by our good navy. The land domain is taken care of by our good infantry and our army, the Thal Sena. But what about the information domain? Only then will we start talking about the information domain, when we make these kind of, when all of us do our work, when all of us come and decide that yes, I am in this position and I am going to do this, I'm going to undertake this change for Bharat, that is when change will happen. That's when we'll all be fighting 24/7 and aiding, helping our military to win wars.
You spoke about the curriculum which took 75 years to start speaking the truth through the national education policy.
Yeah.
Do you think in the near future India would be in a position to adopt with states having no with states journeying in different directions and always being anti-center? Do you think India as a whole would have an education policy which is national security oriented, wherein we are training the youths, we are training each child of us to understand what is fake news, what is fake narratives, what is psychological warfare, and what is defense studies, what is military studies, etc., etc. What do you think? Where are we in a position?
So, the national education policy has given us the chance to do it, and the Pahalgam event has actually illustrated to us that we must do it because please remember when those 26 civilians were gunned down in Pahalgam, they were not civilians of the central government, they were from all over the country, all across Indian states. And we must also understand that if we have to look at Kashmir, then Kashmir is also a part of India. The place where this incident also happened is a part of India. Therefore, now, even if it has to be enforced, the national education policy should enforce a curriculum. I mean, it should be non-negotiable, a security curriculum, a curriculum on security studies, which includes our military campaigns, which includes our border challenges, which includes China and Pakistan studies, is non negotiable, really. It is important for all of us as citizens of India to look at how we can be our own at our own level, wherever we are warriors in national interest. I would like to end by saying Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.